Hello and welcome to the Bendorf Bench, coming to you from Brian's Grill here in Fairfax. Tonight on the bench, we've got Robinson coach Mark Bendorf, Joey Kamada of the Connection Newspapers, Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers, and I'm Greg Wyszynski of the Connection Newspapers. And tonight, we're talking Northern Region football here on the Bendorf Bench. Hey everybody, welcome to the Bendorf Bench. Coming to you from Brian's Grill in Fairfax. Fantastic place and fantastic company tonight. We've got Mark Bendorf, of course, venerable coach of the Robinson Rams, Joey Kamada of the Connection Newspapers, Jeff Graham of the Connection Newspapers, and I am Greg Wyszynski of the Connection Newspapers. Before we get going with the football action, I want to thank the wonderful underwriters who make this show possible. We're talking, of course, about Ford Quality Care Service Center for all of your Quality Care Service Center needs, servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299, and CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. I want to get right to it. We got a lot to talk about tonight, gentlemen, and we're going to get right to it. First, we're going to talk about a little field hockey action. Marshall defeating Lee 1-0, and McLean defeated Langley 1-0. And that's a big game over at that McLean-Langley deal, isn't it, Joey? That's a big rivalry, right?
Well, anytime McLean and Langley hook up, it's a big game. You know, we've still got to look forward to the Week 10 football game, but in field hockey, I know Denby Banbury has a very good team over there this year. And I guess, Jeff, you had an opportunity to see McLean play last week. Even though they won 2-0, she still wasn't happy with her girls.
She was pretty hard on those kids, but, you know, field hockey, it's usually a 2-1 game, 1-0 game, so it's always going to be close and a good rivalry between Langley and McLean.
A couple other scores just to touch on. T.C. Williams defeated Herndon 3-0, which is sort of a surprise. Herndon's got a bit of a talented team this year. And Robinson defeated West Springfield 2-0 this week. And they actually wound up playing that Lee tournament we talked about a couple weeks ago on the Fairfax Sports Report. They played that on Columbus Day, and they good to see them get that in. But want to just now move on to football, I think. Last week's games, number of interesting games, number of games with playoff implications, I'd have to say, Mr. Kamide and Mr. Bendorf. First off, Westfield-Hayfield, 58-27. Westfield defeats the Hawks. Hayfield now a little bit reeling in the Patriot District. Any thoughts on that game?
Westfield, to beat Hayfield like that, it was, amazing. Royster has 5 touchdowns on the ground. Hayfield, a couple weeks ago was a playoff contender. Now they don't, look so much, but Westfield continues to roll through their first half of the schedule.
Well, what a 3-game stretch for Hayfield. I mean, you look at Herndon, West Springfield, and then Westfield, three weeks in a row. And that's a tough schedule, but Billy Puke isn't any different than any of these other Northern Region coaches that are playing these difficult schedules, as Coach Bendorf can attest to. But how about Evan Royster? 318 yards, 5 touchdowns. Tom Vermanik said it's the first time he's ever had a back go for over 300 yards. The guy's on pace. I think we figured this about 2,300 yards is what he's on pace for.
It's got to be tough for a coach like Billy Pugh to have to go and play a Westfield at this point in the schedule. I mean, everybody has sort of settled into their district schedules a little bit now, and then they have to go and play a Westfield team. Is it tough going out of district, coming back in, and doing that sort of thing, or is it just doesn't matter where you play these games?
You didn't want my insight on the field hockey?
I underestimated you.
Okay.
Oh, field hockey czar.
Go Rams. No, there's two ways to look at that. I think playing Westfield, one thing that Hayfield and Coach Pugh can come away with is, hey, we've played the defending state champion. We're probably not going to see anything tougher than that. And you can I'm sure he can take some positive out of it. They did put some points on the board. So I think that's kind of the angle I would approach it from.
Mm-hmm. Big division, no, not Division 5. It was actually a 5-6 game, but a Liberty District game last week. Lee defeated W.T. Woodson 20-16, and that really shakes up the Liberty District in a big way. Obviously, Woodson, I believe, was undefeated heading into that game. They had been sort of rolling up people and getting some really big wins here and there. All of a sudden, Lee wins that game, and now you have that same scenario we've had last year where Lee, a Division 6 team, has an inside shot now with a win over a big dog like Woodson at taking the Liberty District and throwing the Division VI playoff picture into chaos.
Well, and surprising on both ends. Surprising that Lee is able, with all the graduation, with a new coach, they're able to beat their former coach with Jerry Pannoni moving over to Woodson. But for Woodson now, this week's game against Madison now becomes huge because 2 losses in a row within the district is really going to put their playoff chances in limbo.
And it's really funny to go back and think about when Joe Muscat left Lee for McLean. He used to bring back those McLean teams back to Lee, and Jerry Pannoni's teams would give those teams all kinds of trouble because of the rivalry and all that stuff. And then Pannoni brings back Woodson to Lee, and you see the same sort of thing where Lee all of a sudden snaps to and plays a great game. They got, like you said, a little bit healthy against Woodson, and they've got a running back by the name of Brandon Cameron who's been running up a lot of yardage this year. And Woodson by no means is in trouble. I mean, they still have to take care of business in their district. Obviously, a huge game we'll talk about later against Madison, but an interesting result right there. You saw Lee on film against Herndon. What did you think about him?
Well, this got my attention because Herndon really ran roughshod on Lee. Lee was unable to do much of anything offensively, and Herndon pretty much had their way. And then, then Lee gains a certain amount of credibility, obviously, by beating an undefeated Woodson team. So I think, from my standpoint, that underscores the fact that Herndon's a legitimate team. Number one. On the other subject, as far as the Liberty District, that thing's going to be a heck of a battle because Madison, who won the thing last year, they're in the mix, and of course Langley's now getting hot too.
Right.
And all those guys have got to play each other yet, and of course, how it's going to play out. I don't know.
Now, obviously, this will be taken care of once redistricting comes through in some way, shape, or form. But we were talking before about how if in certain redistricting scenarios, we might have had in the northern region a team in AA playing a AA schedule, and then perhaps even playing here based on power points in our postseason. With Lee, it's the same sort of situation, although a little bit different, where they're playing a lot of Division V teams. Yet if they win their district, they get into the Division VI playoffs. As the Division VI coach, playing a tough schedule in the Patriot District, does it give you headaches to think that a team that's not necessarily playing the same caliber of competition as you are gets a shot?
It's a pretty hot topic, as you brought up. For that reason, somebody could get eliminated because if you win your district, by virtue of the district championship, you're in. And I think that's what is driving to a degree the redistricting of grouping 6s with 6s and 5s with 5s. I will say this: Lee getting in last year deserved to be in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And we played them in the first round, and they had a solid club. But your point's well taken.
But like you said, like we've been talking about, I mean, redistricting is going to solve that problem. Every scenario we've seen, they go to the Patriot District next year, and then all of a sudden, now the Liberty District will be all 5s, the Patriot District all 6s.
But you're going to have to do it periodically because as enrollment numbers fluctuate and that dividing line changes, those bubble schools will go back and forth. Well, are you going to bounce from district to district every time it happens?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be an ongoing issue.
We touched on Herndon just a minute ago. They defeated West Potomac 35-0 last weekend, shutting out the Wolverines and looking pretty good in doing it.
Last year, this game, Brandon Geyer ran for a school record 7 touchdowns. Looks like the Hornets didn't have any problems with this game. It's going to be an interesting stretch. Herndon goes 5-0 in the first half of the season, but now they got the Concord district schedule coming up where they play Centerville, Westfield, Oakton, and then they have Robinson in week 6. So Herndon is 5-0, but they're still not a lock for the playoffs by any means.
Now, Coach, you touched on earlier this week the Herndon defense being a bit quicker than they have been in the past, and you've now obviously studied them up on film, getting ready for your big game against them this week. What's it about their defense that makes them maybe a shade better than they were?
Well, they're good at linebacker, and the Blaha kid, who's a returning starter, is having an excellent year. He's also a fullback, and even though they lost a really quality linebacker,
Kevin Grant.
Yeah, Kevin Grant, number 30 last year. They're still very good at linebacker, and where I think they're improved is on their defensive line. Mm-hmm. They're chasing real hard, excellent pass rushers, get upfield, they're big and strong. And secondary hadn't been tested much because nobody's really been able to get past the front seven. But they're always been a good offensive team. Geyer had gaudy stats last year, and this year they can kind of hit you with two guys because Head Williams, the tailback's having an excellent year, and Blaha is a kid that he hits it up in there at 225 pounds and can make you miss too.
Right.
So they're a challenge to defend.
And what Coach Bendorf said and running with it, Tommy Meyer in his 14 previous seasons with Herndon has 13 1,000-yard rushers. So again, an impressive job by Coach Meyer plugging and playing with these running back roles. Brandon Geyer, David Thompson leaves, Brandon Geyer fills his role. Geyer leaves, you got the two kids kind of filling the bill. And through 5 games, Blaha and Head Williams, 22 combined touchdowns between the two of them.
And Head Williams, I had a chance to see Herndon against Hayfield earlier this year. He does a lot after he gets past the line. I mean, he's a good 5-10 yards after if he gets through, and really impressive back. I mean, but he's got to get through. I mean, he's not the biggest kid in the world.
It'll be interesting to see if he can get through Robinson.
That's the question. Yeah, I mean,
And all that 150 pounds soaking wet too.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy is not.
Is that what he's on in the roster? 150
I
pounds?
think he's about 145 pounds for
Okay.
the roster.
But at that position, it doesn't that doesn't make a whole
Right.
lot of difference. There's a lot of small backs that are successful.
You've had a few there. Marcus Howard,
Mike Emo, yeah. And we've got a couple this year. Justin Brantley, who's about the size of Head Williams, is off to a pretty good year too.
Back to the Liberty District, Langley 23, Fairfax 14. Fairfax struggling a little bit. I mean, after winning in week 1, Langley obviously powered with their ground game. You had a nice story on Trevor Bacon this week, Mr. Kamad.
Well, Trevor luckily was able to bounce back after Coach Bendorf's Rams really shut him down in week 1. I think he had 56 yards in that game, but he's gone over 200 the last 4 games since then. He's at 976 yards. Already this is after going over 1,000 last year. And just a great story was a wide receiver going into his junior year. John Howard and his staff come over, and obviously Coach Howard has a run-oriented style there, and was looking for a horse, looking for someone that's going to be able to run the ball up there 25 times a game, and wasn't left with anybody on his roster from the previous regime, and Trevor Bacon volunteered, and now here he is, and he's being recruited by a number of Division I AA programs, and just a great story over there.
There you go. Continuing on with the scoreboard, TC Williams 23-8 over the Chantilly Chargers, and I'm going to lose a gentleman's bet I made with Mr. Rich Sanders, who's the editor of the Alexandria Gazette Packet Sports section. I didn't think TC Williams was going to win 4 games, but they're on their way. Obviously, a little bit changes when they get to the district schedule, but they're playing. Did you think TC would be where they are right now this season?
They're vastly improved, and I did get a chance to see them play Annandale. They played them at Episcopal actually, and where they're obviously improved on offense, but on defense they're much better. And they could be 4-1 at this point because the Fairfax game was a 1-point deal where they had the ball inside the 5 at the end, as I understand it. So they're probably going to make some noise in the district also.
Mm-hmm. Next we have Robinson 42-0 over Lake Braddock, a game I believe you attended, Coach.
For the first half.
This game still had the. I mean, obviously it's probably been tough to see this rivalry sort of change in the last few years. I mean, when I first came to this region in '89, I mean this was a marquee matchup. You didn't get much bigger than Robinson Braddock, but their fortunes have sort of changed. Yours have sort of gotten better. Does it still have the luster when you step on the field at the beginning of a Robinson Lake Braddock game? Is there still that feeling of the rivalry, the sense of rivalry between you two?
Because there's the familiarity amongst the players. They grew up together, they played youth league together, they know one another. There's still a pretty strong rivalry. And I was concerned because we'd come off the big win with West Potomac, and I was concerned that our players may overlook Lake Braddock. But in reality, I felt our team was ready to play.
Right.
And I think that the proximity still keeps it as a strong rivalry.
And then finally, from last week's collection of games, a game that I think a lot of people might have been surprised about. Actually, we're going to discuss West Springfield and Annandale. West Springfield winning that game in a big way. And I mean, boy, they don't skip a beat, do they? I mean, they lose Joey Scaff to injury, and the 2 games he misses are 2 key wins over district rivals. And I mean, this win over Annandale puts them in prime position and actually sets up an interesting game with Coach Bendorf's Rams in a couple of weeks that could determine the Patriot District champion, most likely. You boys surprised about Springfield this year?
Well, sure. I mean, you look at the victory over Annandale. Annandale beat Centerville, a few weeks back, and Centerville if they win this week over Westfield, they could be on the road to winning a Concord District Championship. So Annandale really, I think, kind of hurts themselves losing this game. But to lose Joey Scaff, to lose your starting quarterback, that usually signals disaster for most high school teams. So this one's really impressive for West Springfield.
And the kid they plugged in threw for 180 yards, I believe, in this game. So he's, like you said, they haven't skipped a beat. And playing with what you said, a huge win, because 7-3 this year might not get you into playoffs, whereas it might take 8-2 the way things are kind of shaking out early on here.
And not only that, but the Langley kid in the backfield's been racking up a lot of yardage, and I think he might have been sort of an X factor at the beginning of the season, not getting the attention a lot of the other featured backs got necessarily, especially because his quarterback was getting so much attention on the team. But he's really come through in a big way this year too. They've got a lot of different options offensively this year, and have you gotten a chance to scout him at all? Have you gotten a chance to see him?
Have not, but the information that I have is that they've also improved defensively too, which I think has allowed, with the quarterback change, maybe for them to be a little bit patient. But arguably last year offensively, they gave Westfield and us fits, and they're with starting quarterback back, and then the young quarterback they got playing. That's a scary thought.
We'll see in a couple weeks. Should be interesting.
Yeah.
Let's go on to this week's docket of games. There are a number of incredibly interesting games this Friday night and Saturday, for that matter, and none bigger than what's been generally considered to be the game of the year in the regular season, at the very least, in the last few years, and that's the Centerville Wildcats against the Westfield Bulldogs. You, my friend, you cover both teams. What do you think?
Well, earlier in the week when I was forced to make a decision, I went with Westfield. But the more I thought about it, Centerville, like Coach Bendorf said before the show, probably the most talented at the skill positions. Quarterback, Drew Dudzik has 15 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I mean, that's Sean Glenning, type of numbers up there. Yeah, and running back Daryl Thornton, he actually transferred from Westfield in the off season, and then wide receiver Cameron Dose has 8 touchdowns to lead the region. So on offense, they're probably as skilled as anybody. Westfield, you really talk about one guy, Joey, and I know you've done some research on Evan Royster in the past couple weeks. He's, I think, really the key for Westfield on offense.
Sure, I mean, and on offense, and then with the loss that the Bulldogs had with losing David Ashton to an injury, he now becomes a big player defensively too. This is his first year as a starter in that defensive backfield, and I think we mentioned it a couple weeks ago. I think Westfield's playoff hopes really hinge obviously on Royster, but now you got the issue of, is he going to be overworked playing both ways? I mean, this is a guy that's running the ball 25 times a game, and he's playing 30, 35, 40 defensive plays a game as well.
And I think defensively was Westfield's big question mark going into last year's postseason, and as it proved in the playoffs, they actually played some quality defensive games. This year they lose to Ashton. They don't have some of the starters they had last year, so it should be an interesting.
Now, Coach, you've had your share of quality backs. Of the backs you've had, have any played both ways as much as Royster's seeing time this year on both sides of the ball? Or do you generally cautious about doing that with a featured back?
Yeah, generally you are, because if he's going to be your go-to guy, and it's tough to get the number of touches and the number of carries and then go over and play on the other side of the ball. Now Chase Anastasia played some defense, Mike Emo played some defense, but not full time.
No. Chase a little bit more than Mike, I think, probably.
Yeah, but I don't know what degree they're using Evan, but this game, it's turned in. You talk about rivalries, it's turned into a real heated rivalry. There's a lot of pent up things involved there, and they could end up playing twice.
Yeah. And just to give a little sense of history of this thing, I mean, in 2000, Westfield was new, and they were playing teams from, like, Frederick, Maryland, I don't know. 2001, Centerville won the game 10-7. 2002, Westfield won 21-14, and I think that was the game that got affected by the weather.
Right.
And then 2003, last year, Westfield 38-14 over Centerville. But, you just get a sense for Centerville this year that this is the season for them.
Sure.
I mean, especially now with a loss. A win over Westfield goes a long way to making the postseason, and probably, obviously, winning the district. I like them. I picked them. You picked them. You're starting to pick them. I just think that in this instance, well, I'll tell you why I picked them. Westfield's defense, I got a chance to see him against Braddock. Not the same as last year, obviously, but also they're giving up a lot of points to a lot of different teams. Now, you cover yourself a little bit when you start scoring 58 points against Hayfield and 50 points against Jefferson and things like that. But I'm going to give Centerville. They've probably been game planning this team for the last 4 or 5 weeks. I'll give them this week to start picking apart that defense, seeing exactly what teams are doing to get through, and they're my pick. I think they're going to win this game and sort of break the schneid they've been on against the Bulldogs.
And the community in Centerville is intense as they are about their high school football. They're not happy about losing to those crosstown Bulldogs the last 2 years. So
Centerville's had a couple. They've had a couple, big games in the past, and they lose to Annandale twice in the past 2 years. They've lost to Westfield. They've lost to Oakton. So in their big games in the last few, they haven't been able to pull out victories. So they could use a good win.
And think about the beauty of this rivalry. I mean, you have a school like Westfield that was built basically using freshman players from Centerville's freshman team. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful than that. I mean, you've got it's like taking a rib bone from Centerville and putting it in and starting your own program. And it is a great rivalry, and they're going to have a gigantic crowd there, and hopefully the weather holds up.
And by the same token, Centerville was built using the Chantilly players.
And you know a thing or two about that, right?
Absolutely.
Chantilly's missing those players now.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Absolutely, it's a great rivalry. Big rivalry game also. This is sort of a rivalry that's developed over the last few years. Madison and Woodson, as both of these programs that weren't always winners, kind of came into found their success in the last few years. This game is going to be huge for Woodson, with coming off that loss to Lee. A win here completely erases that loss, and now all of a sudden they're right back in the district title picture.
But a loss here, takes some.
Then you got losses.
Say right out.
Lee
right
and Madison, absolutely.
In a game, with a 7:30 kickoff on a Friday night, you want to be home by 8:45. This is the game to go to, because these two teams are going to run the ball, and they're going to run the ball, and they're going to run the ball until finally someone gets into the end zone. That's what they do. Madison and Woodson, probably two of the best defenses in Division 5 last year, and again, two very solid defensive teams. And I think it's going to come down to who scores first, who has it last. One of those situations. It's going to be a close, probably low-scoring game.
Joey, I do agree with you that they're both predominantly ground pound teams, but contrasting styles.
Right. Exactly.
Madison is just a power, get as many blockers at the point of attack, 4 yards, cloud of dust, eat clock. And Woodson utilized a lot of misdirections and counters, and so even though they both want to run the ball, they do it differently. So it offers a contrast in styles.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see what Mr. Pete Bendorf had to say about Madison. He is, of course, in Charlottesville today for the big Virginia High School League meeting. And I will say,
I'm going to want a note from that.
Exactly. Got to have a note. Got to have some sort of a permission slip to miss this show. Thing that would concern me if I'm Woodson now, Matt Nickerson had been running for miles against teams this season, but he didn't do so well against Lee. And I wonder if maybe there's something that Lee was able to suss out in the tapes on how to contain this kid.
They weren't keeping, like you mentioned, the office the other day, they weren't keeping the ball away at 26 carries, but held under 100 yards for the first time. And who knows, maybe he got tired running for 5 touchdowns a game.
There you go. Herndon at Robinson, a big matchup between undefeated teams. Coach, what's your main concern about the Hornets?
Stopping them. They've been, I think they're probably averaging close to 40 points a game. I don't have the exact stat, but, being able to slow them down and make sure that Head Williams and Blahad don't have big nights and that the quarterback doesn't have a breakout night. And then, of course, we gotta hold the ball and be consistent. When we played Chantilly, we really missed firing quite a bit. We can't have a night like that. I know that.
I think this was the Chantilly game where they had some bad weather.
The field was pretty soft, but I'm not going to blame it on that. I mean, I'm going to credit Chantilly did a very good job of defending us.
There could be some bad weather, and I'm sure Herndon would like to have a muck-out game, against Robinson.
Last time Herndon's beat Robinson was 1996. I believe you've gotten the upper hand the last 5 or 6 games against Coach Myers. So I went to Herndon, but I picked Robinson. I'll be at the game Friday.
There you go.
So I'm expecting
you got all your bases covered, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Maybe you don't want to go back to Herndon. Want to touch on real quick, Jefferson at Yorktown is a very intriguing National District game, simply because Jefferson has had so much success early in the season, so many offensive weapons, versus Yorktown, which is basically one of the most blue-collar teams in the northern region. Who did you pick in this game?
Well, I picked Yorktown because Bruce Hansen's team has been in these games granted, a lot of new faces on that team this year, but they've been in these big games before. Jefferson hasn't played a game of this magnitude in a long time, and I don't think any of the kids they have on their team right now have. That's for sure.
Jefferson predominantly a passing-oriented team, and if the weather's bad on Friday, that could really hurt their chances.
Well, that's true.
This is probably the top game of the year in the National District.
There you go. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching. We're gonna talk a little bit more, but I want to first make sure that we get in all the pertinent information for the viewers. That's the important thing right now. I want to remind everybody, the high school game of the week this week is the game of the week, maybe the game of the season, or the regular season on FSN and Cox 35. Centerville Wildcats and the Westfield Bulldogs. You got Saturday at 6 on Cox 35. Don't miss it. It should be a great, great game. And, of course, we've got a bunch of upcoming games. Lee at Madison, a very big Liberty District matchup. Oakton at Westfield, which could be very interesting depending on what happens this weekend. And then Mount Vernon and Jefferson, what could be a very, very key National District game coming up at the beginning of November. And I want to remind you, everybody, that Fairfax Sports Report, which I think is going to be a combined amalgamation of this show and the FSN show, will be brought to you from Brian's Grill. Fantastic place. Everybody come down and check us out on Wednesdays. University of Mall, Fairfax, Virginia. Thursdays at 8, Fridays at 12:30. And, of course, you can be a part of our live kickin' audience here Wednesday nights at Brian's Grill, University of Mall, Fairfax, 8 o'clock. Stop by, say hi. Quality Care Ford Service Center for all your Quality Care Ford Service Center needs. Servicing all makes and models, 703-383-6299. And CCI Screen Printing for all of your screen printing needs, 703-978-0257. And, yeah, there you go. Northern Region football this weekend is going to be fantastic. And we'll probably find out a little bit more. Any other games that we didn't touch on that you're looking forward to?
Well, some teams still trying to get their first win. Chantilly, if they don't pick up a win in Week 6, they have the Concord District left. So Chantilly could be looking at a 0-10 season. I know Marty Riddle doesn't want to have that happen. So,
not at all. Not a bit.
The Chargers want to have a win this week.
McLean's homecoming game hosting Fairfax in a game that Fairfax normally would be favored. McLean, looking to turn their fortunes around this year with the win over Fairfax, is very much in the race for the Liberty District Championship.
You got your eye on any other games besides the one you got to play on Friday?
That's the only one I'm aware of right now.
Well, it's an interesting spot because I believe Herndon was in the same situation last year coming in this Robinson game, right?
I think it was a 42-14 game, and I know Brandon Geyer was, I think, banged up a little bit in that game.
In the second half, and so we did get a chance to see Head Williams because that's who came in as his replacement. So we know how quick he is.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank everybody for watching here at the Bendorf bench. Join us next week for more fun and excitement, and everybody go out and check out a Northern Region high school football game if you have the opportunity this weekend. I think it's a lot of fun. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree.
Fantastic. In fact, you might want to go to Robinson and check out a high school football game.
I might stop by there.
Fantastic. Alrighty. So, I picked Georgetown too, by the way. I think that Jefferson.
I think I picked Jefferson.
Well, that's your prerogative. I think that's a good pick.